So I'd like to say a few words about the refuges and precepts, because there are some people who are new to this group and you might not have familiarity with them. So what they mean, we chant them in the Pali language, but if you were to look at the chanting sheet, you would see that they're translated. And so you could read the English on the right side. So going for refuge is a very foundational Buddhist practice. The three refuges are the Buddha, which we can think of the Buddha as a historical figure, a human being who woke up in his life and became free of suffering, became deeply wise and compassionate beyond measure. And so this being, Gautama Buddha, or he was known as Shakyamuni before his awakening, can be a kind of a focus for both our aspiration and for some people a kind of a reverence, a devotion, if that is something that is alive in you. It's not required. Another meaning of the Buddha and taking refuge in the Buddha is that the teaching of Buddhism is that each one of us has, as our essential being, that awake nature, that awareness that is always present, always awake, no matter how crazy our mind may be. We may lose sight of that awakeness, and it's always there. We can always come home to it. And a lot of our practice is learning our way home, learning how to find our way home to that awake, aware, and free nature that we are. And so the Dharma, so the second refuge is the refuge of the Dharma. And the Dharma is known as the teachings. So we can hear the teachings spoken out loud. We can read books, the teachings. We can read the original Pali texts in which the teachings were spoken by the Buddha and then later, hundreds of years later, written down. And then the inner truth of the Dharma that we take refuge in is, how is that practice arising for each one of us in our moment by moment coming home, waking up in our lives. So what is the unfolding of the Dharma in this moment? And so taking refuge in any moment in the Dharma could mean just noticing that we're suffering. That's the first of the Four Noble Truths, like that there is suffering, and just noticing, wait a minute, I'm in a rage and this really hurts. And so just stopping. And so that is a moment of Dharma within our lives. So taking refuge in the Dharma is coming home to ourselves and bringing our memory of the teachings to that moment, the medicine of the teachings. And then the third is the Sangha. So the Sangha is the practice community. So all of us gathered here in this room, all of us gathered here online. And so we are a refuge to one another, because our learning of the teachings, the embodiment of the teachings, the unfolding of the teachings comes alive in what happens between people, in what happens as we live in the world and in relationships. And so the Sangha is a refuge because we're sharing a path. We have some shared understandings. We have some shared commitments to not harm each other, to try to be mindful, to try to be kind. So that's the Sangha is a refuge in that way. And then, you know, in a way, we could say just this body in a way is connected to all bodies and to all the earth and to water and air and space and fire. And so this body contains everything, is connected to everything. And so this body also is a refuge. And so when we come home to the body, and we take refuge in this body. And so those are the refuges. And then the 5 precepts are our deep commitment to practice non-harming in our lives. So and there are 5 ways that are explicitly named about how we can refrain from harming. So refraining from taking life, refraining from taking what is not offered, refraining from using our sexuality in ways that's harmful to ourselves or to others, refraining from speaking the truth, speaking lies or speaking what is unkind and harsh, and then the 5th is refraining from getting caught in addictions, which cause us to become heedless. And it's when we get caught up in addictions in using intoxicants in unskillful ways that generally the first 4 precepts become kind of shaky. So that's just, you know, in a nutshell, what we remind ourselves of every time we gather together to practice together. So I'm going to share screen. Could you make me co-host, please? Just those 3 dots on my name by in the upper right corner.
I opened the window a little bit so the air circulates. If you guys are cold, I can close it up.
Okay, thank you.
Fresh air is good.
Yeah, it is. Okay, so share screen. So I will lead. So please feel free. Not all of you may know. It's a very kind of, what's the word? Monotonic, sort of kind of chanting, very few ups and downs, but I'm sure you can follow along if you want, or feel free just to listen. So it begins with an homage to the Enlightened One. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranang gacchami. Sangham saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi sangham saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi sangham saranang gacchami. Panatipata veramani sikapadam samadhiyami. Adinadana veramani sikapadam samadhiyami. Kamesu michachara veramani sikapadam samadhiyami. Musawada veramani sikapadam samadhiyami. Sura maraya maja pamadatana veramani sikapadam samadhiyami. Idam me silam maga phala nyanasa pachayo hotu. Sadhu, 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 anumodami. So friends, I'd like to just give an overview for those of you who are near here on how I've been structuring this, our time together. So we begin with the chanting of the refuges, and then I'll give a very short Dharma teaching. So in the last, since actually September, we've been working on one of the cornerstone discourses, working with one of the cornerstone discourses in early Buddhist teaching, which is the Satipatthana Sutta, the four foundations of mindfulness, or the four establishments of mindfulness. So it's one of the few texts that is a complete teaching. So the Buddha says in the text, if you follow this teaching thoroughly, you will come to awakening. And so that's encouraging. It's also very key. Mindfulness has become such a widespread practice in its various forms. There's secular, there's based in the early Buddhist teaching, there's based in Tibetan teachings as well, an approach to mindfulness. So essentially, it's the same teaching, which is training the mind to be attentive in the present moment without getting caught up in our preferences, our wantings, our resistance, our judgments, So just really with an open heart, open mind, paying attention. And so this is a very liberating practice, because as we begin to steady the mind, to have the capacity to, instead of being caught up and hooked by what we are experiencing in the moment. So, if somebody said something to me, for example, and it hurt my feelings and I'm reacting, and the mind is going, that's not fair, that's not right. I got to say something back. I got to defend myself. And then as mindfulness becomes established, then I begin to notice that reactivity and, and that ouch feeling, like, oh, this hurts, So the body, feels contracted. That maybe if there's a lot of anger, there's a fiery feeling. So and so we learn to pause. So there's a beautiful phrase that is the Tara Brach coined about the sacred pause. So it's that noticing, that mindful noticing and pausing and choosing another way, choosing a way more skillful to respond rather than react. And so these trainings in mindfulness in the Satipatthana Sutta focus on 4 different ways that we can pay attention, 4 different arenas of experience, you could say, that where we could pay attention. And the first one is the body. And so we've been working, and the body, it's first of all, it's very important. It's also the most accessible because, our bodies, we can sense the body. And it's also foundational because we can always come home to the body, and the body is a great ally in cultivating the other forms of mindfulness, which are mindfulness of feelings, mindfulness of mental states, and mindfulness of dhammas or formations. So that may sound mysterious, and we'll unpack them at a later time. But just we have really focused on in our practice on establishing mindfulness in the body, coming home, stabilizing the mind, mindfulness of breathing, mindfulness of body sensation. So all of those most of those talks are recorded, and there's also a lot of literature, a lot of teaching on mindfulness of the body and the Satipatthana Sutta. So you could look those up if you want. So today I'd like to talk a little bit about one of the contemplations that the Buddha gives. The Buddha talks about being mindful of the breathing, mindful of how we're moving the body. So for example, how the body is seated. So, you might not really be conscious or mindful of the position that your body is in, but the Buddha is suggesting that we always be aware of how our body is comported. And it's not about judging. Remember, we have to keep reminding ourselves, it's not about good and bad. It's about, is the body comfortable? Is the body tight? Are we kind of all scrunched up in some position? Is the body twisted in a habitual way? So just noticing the position of the body, noticing the movements of the body. So I'm noticing as I move my hands that I'm present to the moving of my hands as I speak, and it's just part of the way that I express myself. So different movements like walking and reaching and putting on our clothing, and he even, you know, talks about urinating and defecating and all the different activities of the body that we do. So to be aware of them as we do them, to be present in the body. And so we've talked about that. And then there are 3 contemplations in this chapter on the body. And one is about the kind of, what's the word, deconstruction of the body. So we tend to think of our body as, you know, we identify with the body. You know, this body is me, this body is mine. And the Buddha said, you know, if you were to look at a cart, because he said cart because there weren't cars there then, so a cart or a car, and if you were to kind of deconstruct it, either physically or in your mind, and you'd say, well, there are wheels, and there are there's the chassis, and there's the motor, and there's this suspension system, and you can see that I'm running out of, I'm not very good at naming car parts, the fenders and the body and all of the you know, the seats and everything. So would you look at that all spread out on the ground and say that's a car? And you know, no, we wouldn't. It's not a car. It's a bunch of parts. And so it would have said, actually, the body, it's good to think of the body in the same way, because even though we can marvel at the way the body works together, and we do have that appreciation in our, you know, in our sense of anatomy and all the medical knowledge that we have at this point in time, and how the different systems work, we also can, it's good to contemplate that the body also is a bunch of parts that are working together. And so it's really just a system. And it's so, this is to kind of deconstruct our sense of that this is a self, that this is me, this is mine. So that's one contemplation. And another is a contemplation on the 4 elements. And then the final contemplation is on death and the dissolution of the body, the falling apart of the body as it decomposes. And this was very available to people at the time of the Buddha, because they would take the bodies to charnel grounds to let them decompose. I suppose some people did cremate bodies, but I think it was also a very expensive thing. And for the most part, the people would take the bodies to charnel grounds. So I'm going to, and the intention in this meditation on the 5 elements, which I'm going to do, is to recognize that we are, we're not this solid, stable, permanent thing, that there's a continual flux or flow internally and externally, that the elements that form the body internally also exist externally, and that there's a flow in and out of the body to build the body, and that also each of these elements is associated with a specific kind of characteristic. So I'll just say those so that you can have them in mind as we go into the meditation. So that the earth element, the elements are earth, water, fire, and air. Sometimes the Buddha also included space in his discourse, but I won't in this context because it's in the Satipatthana, it's presented as 4 elements. So earth. So we can feel the earth element in our bones and the solidity of our body, pressing down on the earth, and in the earth, in equal measure, pressing back on the body. So that pressing down and pressing back, which is, I think, the first law of physics. Every force has an equal and opposite force, something to that effect. And so we can experience that just in feeling the gravity of the body resting on the ground. And we can feel it as we sense into the body, feeling the bones in the body. One way that it's very accessible, the solidity, the hardness, the rigidity of the body, the shape of the body is feeling our teeth. And the teeth are composed of the same elements that we find, in minerals in the earth and seashells by the ocean. And so we can contemplate internally and externally that there's earth element that we can see and experience and touch. You can go touch a tree and lean against a tree and feel that hardness and resistance. We can feel it in the sits bones that connect with the, our bench or our cushion or chair. So earth, water, we probably each one of us has a little water bottle next to us or nearby, or has taken a glass of water recently. The water, so we're aware that the body continually needs to be hydrated. Water in the clouds, water in the rivers, oceans, lakes, water in the atmosphere. We can feel the water in our body, in the saliva, and the wetness of the eyeballs. We know that the blood is circulating through the body, the lymph system, and so on. So these are the liquid, the digestive fluids, and so on. These are the liquid elements of the body. So we can feel them internally and externally, and both internally and externally. And the fire. So there's the warmth or lack of warmth in the environment around us and in our bodies. So we might notice that if the air is cool, that maybe our fingertips are a little bit cool, but maybe if we bring our attention to the core of the body, that we can feel the warmth there. And we can feel the surface of the skin. So maybe there are varying temperatures around the surface, depending on whether if your legs are folded, like the interior of the fold will feel warmer. So just noticing that and just being aware of how, all of the heat that we generate in the body comes from the sun, because we're digesting the sugars that are created in photosynthesis. So either we've eaten greens or we've eaten animals that have eaten greens. So originally it all comes from the sun. So the sun is really the source of warmth for all intents and purposes in our bodies. And finally air. So just breathing in and out, we feel the movement of air. So food is the earth element. We can live for maybe several weeks without food. At the most, we could live for maybe several days without water, maybe maybe an hour or two if all sources of heat that supported our maintaining the body at its ideal temperature were gone, and maybe minutes. So minutes without being able to breathe if all the air were sucked out of the room, not just metaphorically, but literally. And so we this contemplation also can awaken compassion for us, for ourselves and for all living beings, that we are so dependent upon the conditions that support our lives. And so the way that we live in dependence kind of can stand in a kind of confrontation or questioning about how we may feel so independent, because many of us have a state of mind that we feel independent, and so really taking in a very embodied way our radical dependence on the conditions that support our life can bring a quality of compassion to ourselves and to all living beings. So I'd like to move into a guided meditation on the four elements. Please take a moment if you need to release your posture, to stand up, stretch for a minute, and then take a posture which supports mindfulness. Excuse me. A posture which supports your coming into touch with the dignity, the value of your true self, of your deepest self. As we begin to enter into the meditation, I invite you to acknowledge that wherever you are sitting, you're sitting on Mother Earth. You're sitting on lands that have been tended and stewarded by the indigenous people who were living, traveling, and making their livelihood, building their civilizations on these lands for millennia, many millennia, before settlers, explorers, people seeking new homes because of oppression, because of famine, because they could, because technology enabled them. The technology in Europe enabled them to travel across the ocean. And for so many motivations, some which came from desperation and suffering, some which came from wanting to accumulate, to have an adventure. They traveled across the Atlantic Ocean and arrived and did not recognize the beauty and the humanity of the cultures that were established here among the residents, most of them anyway. And so much suffering happened, much violence was done. And so Mother Earth holds that just in her body, just as we hold in our bodies the harm, the hurt that we've experienced in our lives. And we can acknowledge the peoples that lived on the lands where we're sitting here in Montreal, Chichaga, Montreal, the Kanyankahaga or Mohawk people, among other peoples, lived and thrived, and it was a meeting place for many, many people, for many generations. So remembering that as we enter into a contemplation of earth element. So feeling how the earth supports us. And bringing our attention into the body. And moving our attention from the tips of the toes and the joints of the toes up through the bones of the feet and the padding on the bottom of the feet. Feeling that part of the body which is most in contact with the earth. How it supports us, supports the weight of the whole body. The joints of the ankles and the bone of the lower leg from the ankle to the knee. We can feel into that, perhaps in however you're sitting, you may just be aware of that, the rigidity of that bone, and also all the muscle, the padding of the muscle in the calf around the bone. And the long bone of the thigh, from the knee to the hip joint, and the muscle, the flesh around, around the thigh bone. And the bowl of the pelvis. So the bones have been mostly straight, and this is a kind of a bowl shape structure which supports the organs So all of these elements, the earth element in the muscles and the organs and so on are also, of course, mixed very much primarily with water. So there is also a lot of fluid. So the softness of the muscles, the softness of the organs, feeling the belly rising and falling. That is feeling the softness is noticing as well the water element. And the shape and the form is the earth element. And feeling up through the backbone and the ribs, protecting the very fragile organs in the chest. And the shoulders and the arms, the upper arms, the lower arms, the fingers with all the fine bones. And the muscles. So just feeling into them, feeling the shape of them, the heaviness of them. So experiencing the earth element internally. That's what we're focusing on now. The rise of the vertebrae in the neck. And the throat, shape of the throat. And the bowl of the skull, which houses the brain. And all the face bones, which have openings for the sense organs, which are localized in the face. The eyes, the ears, the mouth, the nostrils. The jawbone, which is hinged, allows us to speak, to chew, to laugh, to shout. To yawn, to open wide, to put a large piece of food in our mouths. So the jawbone, very crucial. Feeling the forehead and the top of the head. And aware of the earth element externally. So aware of people in the room with you, or in your home with you, or people on the street. Of course, the earth herself, the trees, the houses, the shapes of houses. The earth element gives form and structure. So internally and externally, aware that other people's bodies also are full of sensation as our bodies. Other people's bodies also need to be fed. Other people's bodies also ache. Other people's bones sometimes break. Internally, externally, and both internally and externally. So bringing to mind the flow of how we take in food, we take in nutrients, and the body is continuously rebuilding itself. cells continuously rebuilding, blood, continuous blood cells continuously renewing, bones renewing. So this body, I've heard it said that every 7 years, the body is completely remade. So, and it's remade from the building materials that exist in the world in which we take shape, the world in which we emerge and emerge again. Perhaps gratitude may arise for having enough food to sustain us, enough food for the body to be healthy, enough medical care, even if it's sometimes a bit of a wait to get it, but still it's there. And when the body is broken in some way or malfunctioning, malfunctioning bodies can't always be repaired. Sometimes malfunctions don't have the we don't have the means to repair some malfunctions. We can support the body in living as comfortably as it can for as long as it can. And thanking the body for all the many ways that it holds us, holds our life, supports our developing kindness and awareness, supports us through holding the impact of the hurts that we've experienced in our lives until we're ready to turn to those hurts and invite them to express themselves and let go and be released. So now inviting you to turn your attention to the water element, feeling the saliva in the body, feeling the wetness, the wetness in the eyeball, so the saliva in the mouth, the softness in the tissues, which is the water element. Perhaps aware of the rhythmic beating of the heart, pumping blood around the system. Perhaps aware of digestive juices flowing. Aware internally. Grateful for the way the blood system carries nutrients, carries oxygen to every cell. So the water element has one of the elements of is cohesion. So it binds together. So if you have sand and you put some water into it, you can get something that you can shape. Or dry earth, you get mud. So water has this element of cohesion and also flow. So it moves downward. It takes the shape of whatever container it's in. So if we can feel the soft tissues of our body, if we can bring our attention to where we can feel gravity pulling on the softness, the soft tissues of the body, you can get a sense of the wateriness permeating the body. And externally, the water that we're continually drinking or taking in through watery foods, the rain, the clouds, oceans, rivers, lakes. The wetness that permeates the earth. And both internally and externally, how we're continually taking in water. It flows out of the body when we excrete water and solids. It's continually helping us to rebuild the body, keep the body alive, carry all the nutrients and the oxygen and the white blood cells to different parts of the body. And the fire, feeling the fire in the body, bringing the attention into the core of the body and feeling that warmth at the center. Maybe noticing how your fingertips might feel cool, the surface might feel cool. Maybe noticing that as you breathe in, the air feels cool, and as you breathe out, it feels warm. So aware of the life around us, which is nourished and fed by the sun, just as we are. And this fire element is known by its presence and also by its absence. So when the air around us is cool, and we are noticing the absence of the fire element. And the fire element is known by the quality of transformation. So it burns and gives off heat and light, fuels our bodies. And so internally, externally, and internally and externally together, we contemplate the fire element. And the air element, of course, every breath, we're breathing in, breathing out. We're breathing in multiple gases, and we breathe in oxygen in the mix of gases. We require that for the metabolism of food in the body. And we breathe out CO2, which is the waste product of the metabolism. And so we are in an interrelationship with the green life around us, which can breathe in the CO2 and breathe out oxygen. So that beautiful interrelationship of life. And also the air element, we can think of it also together with the space element. When the space element is not specifically contemplated, that our space is filled with the air, and we move through the air. The air element is characterized by motion. So the motion of breath, the movement of waves, sound waves, which are carried on the air. Smells are carried on the air. We see the air more by the effects of it, by the movement of it, the trees and the environment around us. We see things blowing, and we're reminded of the presence of the air, which causes these things to move in the wind. And so the rising and falling of breath is always there. It's continually happening on its own. The body breathes on its own. And so it's such a wonderful meditation object because of that, because in any moment we can come back to an in-breath or an out-breath. It's always there to meet us as we are coming back to mindfulness. So contemplating the air element both internally and externally. And so in this contemplation, what the Buddha is pointing to is to deeply understand, to deeply take in, as deep as our bones, as deep as our blood, as deep as our the metabolism in our body, as deep as the breath in our lungs, to take in deeply that we are all that is. We are this world, and this world is us. And so this body is not me or mine, nor is this world not me or mine. We're deeply interconnected in this exchange, in this constant flow and exchange of these elements. And so for the next couple of minutes, let's just in silence connect with these elements in whatever way is available to you, is closest to you. So thank you for engaging in that practice. I'd like to ask you to just take a moment to think about, maybe not think, but to remember. Remember is a body word. Was there a moment that kind of came forward for you as something that, either as an insight or something that kind of stood out or really resonated for you, touched you? So just taking a minute to reflect on that and touch into anything that came forward for you, or even if your experience was feeling blocked about something in some way, not being able to move into the contemplation, having a sense of resistance or not wanting to go there. So just being interested in that, being open to that, and reflecting on that, not as something that's bad or wrong, but as just what your response was. So just taking a minute because so let's just go for another 30 seconds thinking about that. So I'm going to ask